Good morning and welcome. This morning we're beginning our daily Bible study through a chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. So I just want to remind you that each day we're going to be reading a chapter of Matthew together, and then I plan on posting one of these really brief videos that challenges us to think about what God might be communicating to us about the challenges and the adversities that we're facing in our life and the life of our congregation and our community through His Word. So I just want to encourage you to join us in reading a chapter of Matthew each day. And then after you've done that, when I post this video, I want to encourage you to communicate with us through the comment section on Facebook or on our YouTube channel about what God has been communicating to you through the study of His Word. So this morning we begin with Matthew 1. And if you've read Matthew 1, you'll know that when Matthew begins his gospel, he begins by going way back, almost all the way to the beginning of the history of the people of Israel. And what Matthew spends the first half or so of chapter 1 doing is he's tracing Jesus' lineage all the way from Abraham. He traces Jesus' lineage from Abraham to King David, and then from King David to the Babylonian exile, and then from the Babylonian exile all the way to Jesus' day when he traces the lineage to Joseph and Mary, the parents of Jesus. And as I was reading this chapter this morning, what really stood out to me is that Matthew seems to go out of his way to reference 5 women who played an important and a vital role in bringing Jesus, the Savior of the world, about. And what I mean by that is each of these women faced adversity, they faced challenges, they faced injustice in their life. And yet they remained faithful, they placed their trust in God, and God was able to use their faithfulness. God was able to use their life to bring the Savior of the world about. So just briefly, I want to mention each of the women. The first is a lady by the name of Tamar. If you're not familiar with Tamar's story, she's mentioned in Genesis 38. You can go and read that later today if you get a chance to learn a little bit more about her story. But it's undeniable that Tamar faced adversity. She faced challenges. She faced injustice in her life. Yet she remained faithful, and God was able to use her as an important part in bringing Jesus about. And after Tamar, Matthew also mentions Rahab, and perhaps you're a little bit more familiar with Rahab's story. It's fair to say for her too that she faced challenges and adversity, and she had some brokenness in her life that God was able to transform and to allow her to use her life to do things that allowed her to be faithful, to allow her to be used by God to achieve His purposes and His plan. And also right after Rahab, Matthew mentions Ruth, and we're all a little bit more familiar with Ruth's story about her example of faithfulness and trust and placing her hope in God. And then after Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth, when we get to David's time, Matthew mentions the wife of Uriah the Hittite, and her name was Bathsheba. Matthew doesn't call her Bathsheba in his gospel, but if you know David's story, you know that probably the lowest point of his life, his biggest indiscretion, his biggest sin involved what he did to Bathsheba, and also what he did to Bathsheba's husband, Uriah the Hittite. And what can we learn from Matthew choosing to include Bathsheba in the lineage of Jesus? I think what we can learn is that no matter the mistakes we make, no matter the brokenness that's in our life, no matter the adversity or the challenges we face, if we remain faithful to God, if we place our trust in God, if we recognize our need for God in the midst of our brokenness and our sin, our need for God in the midst of the uncertainty and the challenges and the adversity that we face in life, God will always be faithful to us. God will always be with us. He'll always hold us in His arms. He'll love us. He'll give us everything we need to be faithful to Him in return. And if we are faithful, just imagine what we can accomplish by joining God in the work He's doing in our lives, in the lives of our congregation, and in our community. And finally, the last lady that Matthew mentions in his gospel is Mary, the mother of Jesus. And I don't have to go into any detail about the adversity and the challenge and the uncertainty that Mary faced, the uncertainty that Joseph faced too, because in Matthew's gospel it seems to focus more on Joseph's perspective about the learning that Mary, his soon-to-be wife, was pregnant with Jesus. And I think the lesson that I learned this morning is that we face adversity in life. We face challenges in life. That is just part of human nature. It's the world we live in, the broken world we live in. And today we certainly face a unique challenge. We don't really know what we face or what we're up against, but we can be faithful to God. We can know that God is still with us, that even in this we can place our trust and our hope in God. We can pray to Him and we can ask God, what can we do to be faithful in the midst of this? So that's the challenge I want to leave you with this morning from Matthew 1. What uncertainty is there in your life today? What adversity, what challenge do you face? And what does it look like to you to be faithful to God in the midst of this adversity, in the midst of this uncertainty, in the face of this challenge? How can you be faithful? How can you place your trust in God? So thank you for joining us this morning. I hope to see you tomorrow morning as we open up Matthew 2 and see what God has in store for us through that as well. But I hope you have a blessed and a safe day. Go in peace.